Hello students, and welcome to our normal approach and landing execution video. Before we jump into the cockpit, let's quickly discuss the objective of this maneuver and some key factors that we will be focusing on. The objective of a normal approach and landing is to maintain positive control of the aircraft throughout the traffic pattern and landing sequences, and to land at the airport in a safe, controlled manner. In this maneuver execution video, we will not be covering detailed aerodynamics, maneuver diagrams, common student errors, or the ACS standards. This video is to simply explain and demonstrate the execution of the maneuver and will vary based on the aircraft you are flying. To see all of the details we just mentioned and to study this lesson's full-length presentation, podcast, diagrams, flashcards, lesson quiz, and more, look up the normal approach and landing lesson on our website at wificfi.com. Lastly, before we jump into the cockpit, there are a couple key factors that we need to cover regarding this maneuver. First, we're going to have a strong emphasis on a stabilized approach. We cannot emphasize this enough. A stabilized approach will lead to a good landing. It is very difficult to have a good landing and a good touchdown without a stabilized approach. So what is a stabilized approach? Here's the actual definition of it. A stabilized approach is one in which the pilot establishes and maintains a constant angle glide path towards a predetermined point on the landing runway. In other words, we're looking at a point on the runway, we've got a constant angle glide path, and we've got a constant airspeed as we're heading towards that point. So we're not climbing, descending, making huge changes of power or airspeed. We're not doing any of that stuff. It's a nice, stable, constant glide path towards that predetermined point on the runway. Okay, that's the first thing, probably the most important thing. Next, we will be completing the before landing checklist. We're going to begin this maneuver on the downwind leg at the traffic pattern altitude, and we'll be anywhere between 90 and 100 knots, preferably closer to 90. Abeam our landing point. In this example, our landing point is going to be the 1,000 footers. What we're going to do is reduce our power, we'll extend our flaps, and we'll begin a stabilized descent at 80 knots. We'll make our turn onto the base leg, and we'll kind of show you how to do that while we're in the airplane. When we do that, we're going to increase our flaps to 20 degrees and continue our stabilized descent at 70 knots. Lastly, we'll turn from base to final, align our airplane with the center line of the runway, increase our flaps to 30, and our final approach speed will be 65 knots. Upon crossing the threshold of the runway, we're going to go ahead and smoothly reduce our throttle to idle, complete the round out flare, and touchdown. Touchdown should be made on the center line of the runway with no side drift, so no side loading on the landing gear or anything, and at a slow airspeed just above the stalling speed. We will use the rudder pedals and brakes to maintain the center line of the runway until the aircraft slows to a safe taxi speed for exit. And during the taxi and runway exit, we'll go ahead and retract our flaps. So that's everything here. Let's go ahead and jump in the airplane and show you how this works. Alright, and here we are at our airplane. Before we continue with this normal approach and landing, let me explain where we're at in the process and kind of how we have the aircraft set up. We'll do this real quick here. So first thing I want to show you is that we are going to be flying, let's go the other direction, parallel to, on the downwind to our landing runway right over there. As you guys can see, that is going to be the runway that we're landing on, flying parallel to it, and we are on the downwind leg. Let's go ahead and hop in the cockpit and see how we're looking. So right now I have got our downwind heading bugged. I've got our airspeed at about 90, which is good for the downwind, and we're at our traffic pattern altitude of 1,000 feet. The next thing that you would do once you're on the downwind here in your aircraft is you would do your before landing checklist. Now that's going to vary based on the aircraft, so just pull out your before landing checklist and go ahead and go through it. But that's going to include things such as seat belts, cowl flaps, lights, all those different things, setting your mixture. All those things will be on the before landing checklist. So we're going to say we've already gone through that. As you can see, we got our lights on, we've got everything set up to continue on here on our landing. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause it. We're going to continue on downwind. Once we get to a beam our landing point, which is going to be our 1,000 footers, we'll go ahead and bring our throttle back, add in a notch of flaps, and begin our descent as we continue through it. And we're going to be looking out our window like this as we track along our runway to see when to make our turns, when to bring our power back, those different things. So I just wanted to show you that so you can see what the view is going to look like as I change the camera here. So let's go ahead and get to it then. So we are continuing here on our downwind. Just making small adjustments to our trim and our power. Just watching our altitude, our airspeed, all that good jazz. Go ahead and double check, see how we're looking. Yeah, we're looking pretty good here. Coming about to the beam point of the end of the runway. So as we're getting there, let's go ahead and check. We're looking good. Okay, let's go ahead and bring our power back. I'm going to reduce the power, kind of start a nice, easy, stabilized descent straight ahead. We're going to be looking to descend at about 80. We're not descending too fast, okay? We're not not descending at all, but we're also not doing 1,000 feet a minute. You know, we're doing about 300 to 500 feet a minute, just nice and gentle. Everything's real stable. Now, as we're doing this, we're going to keep on looking back, seeing where we're at with our runway. It's probably a good time to go ahead and make our turn onto base. So make our left turn over to the base leg. As you can see, we're turning onto base. We're going to keep the descent going, just nice and gentle, nothing crazy. Making small adjustments to our power and our trim. Making this 90-degree turn here onto base. Obviously, it is a little bit easier in the airplane to see where you're at than it is on the flight simulator, but we'll make this work. We're going to go ahead and look. Looking pretty good with our runway, so I'm going to extend our next notch of flaps, continue our descent, and we're going to be slowing to probably about 70 here. As we make our turn onto final, making small adjustments to power and trim, making our turn. There's our runway. Again, it is kind of hard to see. It's much easier to see the runway in the actual airplane, but we'll go ahead and get lined up with our center line. Getting a little bit fast, so I'm going to go ahead and bring some power back, and we are in the white arc on our airspeed, so I'm going to add our 30 degrees of flaps. Alright, so here on final, what we're really focused on is three things: that our glide path remains fairly constant, our airspeed looks good, do not get slow on final, and that we're going to be landing right on the center line. So I'm going to creep over here to the left just a little bit. I'm going to get on center line. My airspeed's looking good at that 65 like we talked about. Making small adjustments to power and trim, getting that center line lined up right between my legs here. Center line, trim, power, everything's looking good. Airspeed, center line, glide path. Airspeed, center line, glide path, right? You just kind of keep saying that to yourself over and over again. As we cross the threshold of the runway, we're going to go ahead and bring our throttle back to idle. We're going to come down into the round out here, where we just kind of hold the nose right up off the ground. Now, I'm floating a little bit here in the sim, but you're going to hold your nose right here off the ground. And then as the airplane starts to sink again, just add a little bit more back pressure to put it right there on your main landing gear. At which point you can go ahead and use your rudder pedals to stay on center line and steer the aircraft nice and gently. We'll go ahead and retract our flaps up all the way. We'll use nice gentle braking. Don't need to slam on the brakes or anything. Just come into a nice easy taxi speed. At which point we can go ahead and make our turn, exit the runway, and then we would contact ATC and see what other instructions they had for us as far as taxiing back to our parking spot, to our hangar, whatever it may be. So there is that, guys. We went ahead, we started on our downwind leg, we came around, we made our normal landing. I'll show you where we're at, right on this runway here. We exited the taxiway, and we are safe and happy.